go ahead and get started. I call to order the meeting of the Manassas Park Governing Body for February 16th, 2021. Per the General Assembly's approval of the Governor's amendments to the biennial budget, the governing body may now meet electronically without a quorum actually assembled in a single location and without the in-person governing body members voting on the participation of those who are remoting in. The following benchmarks for the meeting this evening have been met. First, the governor has declared a state of emergency for the current COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with Code of Virginia. Second, the declared emergency makes it impractical or potentially unsafe for the governing body to assemble in a single location, and guidance from state and federal governments support this determination. Therefore, the governing body will be meeting with various members participating electronically through GoToMeeting. Third, the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue the operations of the governing body. Fourth, the governing body will make available a recording or transcript of the meeting on its website in accordance with Code of Virginia. Fifth, notice has been and will continue to be provided to the public using available methods. Lastly, we have made and will continue to make arrangements for public access through electronic means, including the ability to comment. Those participating electronically are Councilmember Alana Mensing, Councilmember Hasib Javed, and Vice Mayor Banks. Those participating in person are Councilmember Yessi Amaya, Councilmember Laura Hampton, Councilmember Darrell Moore, and Mayor Jeanette Rischel. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, all opposed, abstained, motion carries. Please join us in a moment of silence, and Councilmember Hampton, would you lead us in the pledge? Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is anyone signed up to make public comment? Okay, has anyone emailed or contacted us with any comments at all? No, okay, seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on. There's no information, no recognition, no presentations. Consent agenda consists of approval of the minutes of February 2nd, 2021, reappointment of Ms. Andrea Barbusa to the Manassas Park Library Board, reappointment of Mr. Gary Fields to the Upper Occoquan Service Authority Board of Directors, and recommendation to the Circuit Court that Mr. Kevin Brendel be reappointed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Do we have a motion? So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you. There's no unfinished business, so moving on to new business. Community Development, Jeter Mongoose 184. And that would be Calvin.
Good evening, everyone. Calvin O'Dell, the Director of Community Development.
Okay.
Before you tonight is an item from our capital improvements plan. This is a portable or towable jetter. As many of you are aware, most of our sewer cleaning and maintenance is accomplished by water-powered jetting of the sewer lines, sanitary and storm, as a way to clean grease and debris out of the sanitary lines. The only method we have at hand right now is our large sewer flusher trucks. These are very large vehicles with large chassis, very large storage tanks. The gross vehicle weight is exceptionally high, and the overhead clearance required to get them into places is extraordinary. So many of the sewer storm sanitary sewers throughout the city are not actually near paved roads or gravel surfaces where we can get into them. Many of our manholes are back in the woods along easements. Some of them are in people's backyards and sanitary sewer easements or storm sewer easements. So a towable jetter will get us to places where a full-size flusher truck cannot. This type of equipment, as we commonly do, is easier sourced through a procurement option such as Sourcewell, where, in Virginia, there may be only one or two options for equipment, but in these international or national sourcing companies, we can find numerous models that have already been vetted and prices have been fixed. We've selected the MSC Equipment's Mongoose Model 184. This is through Sourcewell Cooperative Purchasing Membership, formerly known as NJPA. The price of the unit is $59,984.03. This was an item that we budgeted for in our capital improvements plan. A portion of this is coming out of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund capital budget, and a small portion is coming out of the Stormwater Enterprise Fund capital budget, because this piece of equipment can be used to clean both types of sewers and manholes. Are there any questions about the purchase request?
Thank you, Calvin. Now, for the benefit of the folks at home, I just want to confirm that a regular-sized truck will be able to tow the jetter behind it. Is that correct?
Right. This is pulled by a regular-sized pickup truck, the same type we have, 8 or 10 of in the fleet. So this can be backed into a tight space, such as someone's backyard where they have a storm or sanitary easement. The overhead clearance on a regular pickup truck is substantially less than a sewer flusher truck. So this will get us back into our easements that are back in the woods and things like that. And the weight itself, if we were to take a flusher truck into some of the stormwater easements, especially when they're in people's side yards or rear yards, we would do substantial damage to the turf, especially if it's been raining. And oftentimes these are emergency flushings that we're having to do to clear the lines. So we don't really get to pick and choose perfect weather where we go into people's backyards. This piece of equipment weighs a lot less, will do a lot less damage to the turf, and can get into much tighter spaces.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. We'll start with our folks at home. Councilmember Mensing.
No question.
Okay. Councilmember Javed.
Yeah, I have no questions. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Banks.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Amaya.
A quick question. It says it's $59,984, but we had budgeted previously.
Can you speak directly?
I'm sorry, yes. Yeah. Okay, it says it was the request is for $59,984.03, but it was budgeted for 48 plus the 12,000 on the budget for FY21. Am I correct? Is that how it works?
We actually had 48,000 budgeted from the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund capital line item and 12,000 from the Stormwater capital line item for a total of 60,000.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Hampton.
Yep, a quick question, actually 2 questions. What's the lifespan of this piece of equipment? And does it come with a warranty? I may have missed that when I read it, but I didn't see anything about a warranty.
Yeah, I can check on the full warranty and get back to you. Again, these are kind of complicated pieces of equipment. So the entire trailer, chassis, tanks, I would expect a lifespan of 15 to 20 years on certain pieces of the apparatus, but things like pump motors, the hoses, those will be changed out oftentimes way more frequently. A hose can rupture at any given time and need to be replaced. The motors, you can usually anticipate 5 to 6 years life out of a motor before it's going to start making noise. A bearing will go and it's going to need repair or replacement. So these are complicated apparatus. I'm sure it comes with some sort of base warranty, but I'll have to send you that information later.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Calvin. The staff recommendation is that the governing body approve the purchase of the Mongoose Model 184 trailer jetter in the amount of $59,984.03 and authorize the city manager to issue a purchase order to MSC Equipment for the purchase of the Mongoose Model 184 trailer jetter. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to manager's report.
Nothing to report tonight unless you wanted to discuss the mailbox parking issue or not.
Okay, we received a request to alter the enforcement for parking by mailboxes from the current time to 6, I think it is 6 to 6 a.m. in the morning. Laszlo can administratively waive that or administratively instruct the PD not to enforce from 9 p.m. to 5 in the morning, and residents are requesting more leeway. So,
Yeah, do you want me to?
go ahead,
so
go ahead.
It's not that we're not going to enforce it, it's just it doesn't make sense to enforce from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. because there's not going to be the actual mail delivery trucks. So it's better to utilize police resources to enforce other things during that time. The spirit of the law is, again, to ensure that the Postal Service has access to mailboxes. So again, as a staff, I don't think we would feel comfortable with directing enforcement away from that from the times of 6 to 9 because the mail delivery is still occurring on occasions between that time. It usually won't go past 9 p.m. So if that's something that's of serious interest to the governing body, that would have to be something that would have to be done legislatively through a code amendment. Right now, there's no time. It just says you will not park in front of your mailbox. That was, I believe, done by the city historically at the request of the U.S. Postal Service. But you all have discretion to set timeframes for when that is or is not. So just something that we received a request and it's something that you would all have to decide. But administratively, again, we wouldn't be directing police assets towards the off hours. It just doesn't make sense to do that. But anything beyond that would require legislative action. So I just wanted to bring that to your all's attention.
So do we have a sense of whether folks are in general agreement or general opposition? So Councilmember Amaya, your thoughts?
I'm in agreement with the manager in regards to, I don't see why it should be enforced at nighttime since it's not when the mail.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. That I'm in agreement with the mayor, the manager regarding the timing. I don't think it should be something that the police department should be doing during those times since there's no mail. Normally, no mail is going on at that time, so.
Are you in favor of passing a
I'm
change
not.
I'm sorry?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
Right.
Okay. Councilmember Moore?
Question for the city manager. Do we currently enforce the no parking in front of mailboxes?
Yeah, so it's something that we haven't been doing proactively, right? Because we have a lot of other things to enforce, but when we get complaints, because we do receive complaints, then police will actually go out and start enforcing, right, on those issues. So yes, we do actually go out and ticket, and sometimes, the availability for when to ticket because police are busier doing other things will be in off hours. So when we receive a request, it just, we had to reevaluate this, and doesn't make sense for police use of resources during the off hours to be enforcing something like that when there's other enforcement areas that we would shift our police department at. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, during the daytime, during the periods of postal delivery service, to not enforce during that time period would really, or to shift police resources and not really focus on that would really require legislative intent about what you all would want to see happen in our city.
So if we put restrictions that you had to move your vehicle by 5 a.m., we currently don't. Right now, you're not supposed to park in front of your, right. So my question is, would that start a slippery slope? Would people really be go out in there moving their cars at 5 a.m. since they're parking there
Well, I
because
think
of
the
the extra
idea is that
spaces?
they would be gone to work by that time. And that's why the residents are
Maybe.
requesting 6 to 6, because they want to have
Extra
extra
spaces?
parking when they arrive home in the evening at 6, and then be able to leave for work the next morning at 6, but still park in front of the
Yeah.
mailbox. I think that's the thrust of what the request is.
I've seen lots of, not a lot, a couple email exchanges with the postal carrier in Bloom's Crossing about people parking in front of their mailbox and not being able to deliver the mail. I'm just concerned that people won't move their cars. They'll park there and they'll know it's free, and because they can park there at night and they won't get up and move them. Some will go to work, some won't. And that's just my concern that I have.
Yeah, so you want it to continue to be enforced?
And not necessarily enforced, because we're not really enforcing it now because we have,
When we say enforcement, we're saying proactively ticketing people for doing so.
yes.
Okay, so you don't even favor the 9 to 5?
No, because I don't think people are going to move their cars.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hampton.
I say keep it simple. You just don't park in front of the post office box. It's, just to keep it simple. So no changes.
No changes, okay. Councilmember Mensing.
I'm concerned that during the holidays that mail delivery isn't finished by then. And I'm also concerned that people aren't out of their house by 5 a.m. So I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, so no change or 9 to 5?
Correct. No change.
No change, okay, thank you. Councilmember Javed.
So what's the question is if we should enforce between 9 and 5? Is that what I'm getting at?
So the question is, do you want to, really the question for the governing body is, do you want to establish a code that sets specific time for non-enforcement? That's really the question. And it seems like the answer is no so far from what we heard, that everyone likes the idea of prohibiting parking in front of mailboxes.
Yeah, I mean, just make it simple, like Ms. Hampton said, we just don't park in front of mailboxes. Yeah, I'm not in favor of, I guess, non-enforcement. Is that between 9 and 5?
So Councilmember Javed, continue enforcement, did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Yes, continue enforce, okay. Vice Mayor Banks?
No change.
No change, okay. Status quo,
That's clear.
enforcement continues as it has been historically. Okay, thank you. Okay, there is no closed meeting. Okay, number 13, for the folks at home, we're not going to adjourn. We're going to take a 5-minute break so we can accommodate any needed preparation for the work session. When we come back, City Attorney is going to conduct the work session. It will be on land use and development law training. So we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Exciting stuff. Probably the viewership's going to go way up right now.
Absolutely, Dean. They know you're going to present.
Yeah, how many are watching us right now on YouTube?
Probably not very
A
many.
handful.
Right.
See?
Yeah, gee.
It's halfway there.
Yeah, we're still on.
Are we live? Okay. We're broadcasting, that's what I meant? Okay. So
Okay, I think, okay, now we're live.
We're live now. Okay. Well, we're back, folks. For the benefit of the folks at home, members of the Planning Commission have joined us. The governing body representative to the Planning Commission, Councilmember Mensing, is still with us. And in addition, electronically, we also have Planning Commission Chair Lester Finkel, Planning Commission Vice Chair John Evans, Commissioner Michael Becketts, and Commissioner Martha Collier. So welcome, folks. Our City Attorney, Dean Crowhurst, will begin the work session with a summary of information about land use in general. This should take about 15 to 20 minutes. I would request that everyone please write down your questions and hold them to the end of Dean's summary. Then we can each provide our questions or comments one by one. The next part of the work session is less structured and it's more interactive. So Dean will provide questions for us to answer. So if several of us speak at the same time, we'll just have to work through that as best we can. So, Dean, would you like to proceed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I want to do tonight is give kind of just a structure of land use and development laws. Seems to be somewhat of a complicated topic, but it's very pressing for what we do here in the city. To start with, I want to distinguish between legislative acts and ministerial acts. Legislative acts are where you, the legislature for the city, does something. So you pass laws, you pass budgets, those are legislative acts. Ministerial acts are the things that the rest of us do after you've given your direction. Okay, we don't have the discretion that you have. Okay, so a ministerial act, we actually have to do that as long as all the requirements have been met. So if there's a requirement in the law that if you do this, then this will occur, we have to. If a staff member does not do that, someone can go to court and they get a writ of mandamus, where the judge basically says, do what you're supposed to do. Okay, and it's important to distinguish between the two because where the governing body and the planning commission get involved, at least for zoning and comprehensive plan amendments and conditional use permits, those are all legislative acts. Site plans, building plans, permitting, those are all ministerial acts. So as I kind of go through this, I'll just point out that this is a legislative component, this is a ministerial component. Okay, so let's start off with the comprehensive plan. Okay, we are required by Virginia law to have a comprehensive plan. Every locality has to have one. And it is the vision that the community has for its future. It's not as precise as the zoning ordinance. It's broad in the sense that, okay, we kind of want residential over here, we want commercial over here, we want industrial over here. We don't get into the nitty-gritty. But we are required to have one, and any change to the zoning of a particular property has to be in conformance with the approved comprehensive plan. So it's important to kind of understand the relationship between the two of them. Interestingly, we're not required under Virginia law to have a zoning ordinance. We are required to have a comprehensive plan, and it has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission at least once every 5 years just to make sure it's what we still have a vision for. Okay, and we're looking, about 20 years down the road where we want to be as a community. And that guides everything we do. All right, so the zoning ordinance implements the plan, the comprehensive plan. So we have the desire for where our community is going to be. To get there, we have to have some sort of a mechanism, and that's the zoning ordinance. So we have various zoning districts that allow for certain development to occur. If you want to have a certain type of development and it's only allowed in a particular zoning district, but that zoning district is not compatible with the comprehensive plan designation, then you have a problem, right? Mm-hmm. Because you cannot do something legislatively through the zoning ordinance that is in conflict with the comprehensive plan. And we get into this a little bit when we have a situation where a property is zoned a particular zoning district that has a conditional use that they'd like to do, but unfortunately the comprehensive plan doesn't allow that use. Even though it's a conditional use within the zoning district, if you get a conditional use permit, it has to also be in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So you can have an interesting situation. A little bit of a history here. At one point, we decided, well, not we, the governing body decided that all of Connor Center was going to be city center redevelopment district. Okay, so that meant that every single property up in Connor Center, even though they were all zoned industrial, and industrial allowed for a conditional use permit for automobile repair was not consistent with the downtown, the city center redevelopment district concept under the comprehensive plan, so none of those people could take advantage of that conditional use permit. So the governing body scaled it back a little bit. So now we do have conditional use permits up there for auto body in Connor Center, most of it. Okay, so some of Connor Center is actually in the City Center Redevelopment District. You're going to see a little bit north of City Hall here. Some development is going to occur as part of the City Center Redevelopment District, even though it's technically part of Connor Center, which is a development. It's not the actual district itself. So I know it's really confusing, and I'm sorry if I'm making it more confusing. So moving right along, you have the comprehensive plan, you have the zoning ordinance. Once you have the zoning, you can also then get a conditional use permit that is permitted within there. Sometimes you also need to get a waiver because there are certain circumstances that just don't quite fit what you want to do. Again, this is a legislative act. Okay, the governing body and the planning commission are going to look at the waiver application and see if that's something they want to do. Now, I want to back up for a second here also, because for a comprehensive plan, you can actually request to have it amended. Okay, say you don't like the comprehensive, the plan designation your property's in, you really want to do this other use, it's not compatible with your plan designation, you can actually come in, apply for a comprehensive plan amendment, a rezoning, and also say a conditional use permit if it's a conditional use within that zoning district. And you can also come in with the waiver all at the same time. We allow concurrent processing here in Manassas Park. Interestingly, for the comprehensive plan amendment, you have complete discretion. Because if you remember, the comprehensive plan is the future, what the community wants to do. You're under no obligation at all to ever amend that. If you look at it, it's fine the way it is. There's no problem. And you as a governing body and the planning commission can recommend that you retain it as it is. Okay, so you never have to amend the comprehensive plan. You also don't need to get permission from the property owner to amend the comprehensive plan. Now, zoning, however, because the zoning ordinance is something you've put out there as uses you'd like to see within a particular zoning district. Okay, so there are two kinds of uses. Generally, there's others, but the big ones are by right uses, which are listed in the zoning ordinance as permitted, and then there are conditional uses. Okay, permitted uses are by right, meaning that once your property is zoned to that district, no further legislative act, that's planning commission and governing body, is required for you to do that thing. Conditional use permits, though, have something about them where the planning commission and the governing body need to make sure that they, whatever is going to occur in the community is somehow mitigated. So they want to have a little bit more oversight. So there's another, it has to come back to you. And those interestingly, are also the same thing. So if you put a use in there that you've said is allowed either by right or conditional, it's something that you have to, once they meet all the requirements, you really have to approve that. Otherwise, you can get sued. And the reasons you can deny something all have to do with land use, okay? So things like traffic impact, schools impact to parks, things that are going to impact the community somehow are appropriate land use considerations. The fact you don't like the owner, not a land use consideration. The fact that they aren't doing something above and beyond what's in the zoning ordinance, not a land use consideration. Okay, if they've met the requirements, then you have to look at it as far as its impact to the community. Okay, so those two, rezonings and conditional use permits, you have less discretion because you've already said in the zoning ordinance this is a preferred use. Okay, so you can't just say I don't like the use, I don't like the person. You have to look at it very objectively. Okay, comp plan, you can say no, we're not even interested. We don't want a restaurant there. We don't want houses there. We've already made our decision. The comp plan is what it is. We don't want it. Okay, so those are kind of a distinction there. Also for the waiver, it's kind of like the same as a comp plan amendment. Okay, you're never under any obligation to approve a waiver because a waiver is by definition something that's away from what you've already said is preferred. Okay, some weird thing. So you have two that you have complete discretion with, comp plan amendment and the waiver. Two that you have discretion, but only as far as how it's land use impacts to the community, and those are rezonings and conditional use permits. So it's a lot that I just threw at you. Take a breather here. I want to ask Nikki if I gummed up anything, or do you have anything to add?
No, I would just highlight, that we have two distinct maps, comprehensive.
I'm going to show them that in a second here, and so they can get a sense of the difference between the two. Okay, so let's just assume that we've gone through this whole process. Okay, somebody came in with a comp plan amendment, a rezoning, a conditional use permit, and a waiver, and they got them all approved. And now we get into the ministerial component of this. Okay, this is where we do the site plan review. Okay, site plans are something that, as long as it is consistent with the law, the underlying zoning ordinance, okay, there's requirements in there. We have also a public facilities manual that's a requirement. And then we have the rezoning and the conditional use permit. So as long as it's consistent with all that, there's not a lot of discretion on whether to approve it or not. Now, unlike the four legislative acts we just discussed, comp plan amendment, rezoning, conditional use permit, and waiver, site plans go to, are approved by the planning and zoning administrator, not the governing body, upon the recommendation of the planning commission. So they will go before the planning commission, not as a public hearing, but as just part of a regular public meeting. It'll get discussed. Planning commission will make a recommendation to the planning, the planning and zoning administrator, and then she makes the final decision, okay? So, big legislative, then we're down to ministerial. Once the site plan's been approved, then people can go ahead, they enter into a performance agreement with the city, they post some sort of surety for the public improvements. It's called posting a bond typically, which we can also do cash escrow, we can also do letters of credit. Some sort of surety that says that if this developer doesn't do the public stuff that they said they would do, then the city can step in and do it, and we have a source of funding to draw from to do that. Okay, so that's what when you hear the word or the term called bond, that's what you're doing, is you're pulling that money out to get either your staff or your contractors to come in and do that. Okay? And I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions because I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you rather quickly here, and I'm doing this for a reason, because I want you to just be thinking how it all works together. So now we have the site plan, we have the bonds. Once you get all that stuff, then they can go and pull permits to actually start doing the work, right? That's all zoning stuff. Okay, then we get into actually building the building that comes out of the ground. They're related, but it's a different set of laws entirely. And it's handled by a different department in the city, okay? Well, it's technically the same department, community development, but whereas Mickey is the planning and zoning administrator, and she operates within a certain area of the law under our zoning ordinance, the building official operates under building law. And so building plans are approved by Calvin, he's our building official. And then once the plan has been approved, then they can pull permits to actually start building the building. So that's kind of all the pieces that it all kind of goes together. I threw it at you rather quickly, and I promised you it was only going to take 15 minutes. I think I met the 15-minute requirement. So now that I've thrown all that at you, I'm willing to accept some questions.
Okay. Well, you can go longer if you feel you need to.
Well, I don't want to make people's eyes roll in the back of their head. I mean, I've done this many, many times over the years, and if I go too long, people lose interest because it's a lot of stuff to try to digest all at once.
Okay.
So I'd rather leave it there, and then if it's issues, you can just follow up.
Okay. Well, let's begin with Commissioner Collier. Do you have any comments or questions? Are you there, Martha? Okay. Well, let's move on. We'll come back to Martha. Commissioner Beckett's.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Evans.
No questions. Thank you.
Chair Finkel.
No questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Mensing.
Just a clarification, Dean. You said that the comprehensive plan gets updated every 5 years. Is that by the Planning Commission or the council or both?
Well, the planning commission has ultimate authority or responsibility to make sure that happens, but they don't have to update it, they just have to review it every 5 years, at least every 5 years, to make sure it still represents what the community wants to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Javed?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Banks?
No questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Amaya?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Councilmember Hampton?
Okay, I just want to make sure I get this right. So legislative, it drives the administrative, and under legislative falls, if I read my notes, the buy rate and the conditional use. That's the only place where we have some flexibility, right? Do I get that confused?
Well, you're kind of lumping things together.
Okay.
So the legislative component is when you're amending the comprehensive plan, you're amending the zoning map called rezoning. You can also do a zoning text amendment, which is another amendment of the zoning ordinance. And then you can do a conditional use permit and a waiver.
Okay.
Now, I just want to point out that in Manassas Park, the waivers are legislative. Other jurisdictions have them administrative, so it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. We do it that way.
Okay.
Okay, and then within the zoning itself, you have by right uses and conditional uses. So if you go in, and we're going to get into this a little bit, so some of this may make a little more sense if we start going through these questions I sent out to you guys,
Yeah.
and I did that for a reason. So you got a little bit of understanding, and then I'll put it into practice, so hopefully it'll kind of gel a little bit better.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Moore?
Yeah, no questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, let's go back to Commissioner Collier. Are you there, Martha?
Didn't see her on there.
I don't see her.
You don't see her? Okay. Someone had phoned in and we thought maybe,
Yeah, she may be called in, but I don't, it doesn't, you don't know who it is when it's a caller.
yeah, well, we weren't sure, but we thought that might be her, Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So what I have up on the screen here is our GIS system. It shows the different planning districts. It's the comp plan districts, okay? And we can't see it here. Let me see. I mean, I'm having, let's see if I can kind of zoom in a little bit here on the downtown area. All right. So here's City Hall right here. Now, this has not been updated since the last rezoning, so it still shows, you can't tell, but over here, it says PF is pink. Okay, so all this pink is public facilities, okay? This is or public, I'm sorry. This is the zoning, this isn't the, sorry, this is the actual zoning map here. So these are zoning districts. So this is, the pink is PF, public facilities. That's what the city does to its property, and then also the schools and a couple others. It's not really required for us to do this, but we do it to kind of make sure the citizens don't get mad at us. Because technically, since you could very easily rezone whatever you wanted. We're not really bound to our own zoning laws for city-owned property. So you could do whatever you wanted, but we developed this public facilities district many years ago to try to, even it up a little bit, so the city's not getting treated differently than everyone else. Okay, so let's see, let's try to zoom in a little bit better here. All this blue stuff up here is all industrial. I-1. This here has all been rezoned to mixed use, which is mixed use over here. You have plan unit development here. You have, this is all what is it, R2, I believe it is? I can't really see too well. R2 is multifamily.
Right.
Townhomes, apartments. You have, when you go over to the west side of the city, it's all R1. Now, R1, if you go into the zoning ordinance, under R1 zoning district, it'll tell you exactly what you can do. tells you, how much distance has to be between the house and the front of the lot, the side of the lot, the rear of the lot, how tall it can be. It has a lot of different things for that particular zoning district, okay? So I'm gonna come out of here. I'm doing this, let's see here. Let's get rid of this. Go to the comp plan. Let's see. These are the planning districts. See, they match up somewhat. Okay, so this here, this orange here, is the Four Corners redevelopment district. Okay, this is Route 28. This is Manassas Drive. Okay, you come over here, and the blue, the light blue, is the city center redevelopment district. And this kind of rich orange up here is the Connor Center redevelopment district. And these are our big designations, if you will, because we're trying to entice development in there. We offer some incentives, development incentives for people to come in there and enter into an agreement with the city and rezone their property to one of the incentive zoning districts. We don't need to get into that right now, the details, but that's just so you know what these are, what they're for. Now, whoops. I want to show you just the city center area here. Now, within this city center area, this is all the blue. Within this area, the only two zoning districts that are compatible are the planned unit development and the downtown mixed use. And that's going to be helpful later on when we do these little questions here when it starts asking, what you can do, where, and how. That's how they kind of all go together, okay? So a residential, this over here, multifamily residential, okay? We allow R2, okay? We also allow planned unit development for residential, okay? And so the distinction between planned unit development and mixed use, downtown mixed use in a normal zoning district, ordinarily you have a piece of property, you rezone it to some district, and the entire property is that use. Okay? Years ago, they decided, well, why don't we do it where we can have a property that gets rezoned, but we have different kinds of uses. They came up with a planned unit development. So what they did is they designated bays, land bays, within this planned unit development rezoning. And so what you'll have is a planned unit development residential designation or a planned unit development commercial designation. Okay, and that becomes part of the overlying zoning. So you can't go in there just because it's PUD. You can't go into a planned unit development commercial and put residential on it. It can't happen, even though it's all part of the same zoning. Some of you may remember a while back down here, the old the Andrew Drive, where the vacant lot that was planned for commercial for many years. Well, it was also had a zoning planned unit development commercial as well. They had to come in and do a rezoning just so they could put townhomes there, because PUD commercial doesn't allow PUD residential. Okay, so that kind of shows you that. Now that was one effort. Then later on they came up with these mixed use districts, which are more kind of layered. Okay, so whereas a PUD has little land bays that you have to distinguish, or you can only put certain types of uses in, a mixed use district typically has things stacked, and you can have a bunch of different things within the same footprint, but they're different levels of the development. So we have the downtown mixed use development. Across the street, we have ground floors commercial. The top 3 floors are residential. Behind that, we have the ground floor commercial, and then the top 6 above that are all residential. That's the concept with mixed use. You could also have office. So we could have a live-work environment over there where you have residential and then maybe an office down the floor. Next to it could be a restaurant. I mean, so that's what you can do with the mixed-use stuff, okay? So now that we've kind of shown you the districts and the zone districts and the comp plan districts and kind of explained how they go together, I'll go, unless there are additional questions, we can get on to the questions that I sent out to you on Friday, I believe it was. Eric, ready to go?
Go ahead, ready to go.
So, the scenario, and I have folks that might be watching who aren't familiar with the scenario, so I'm just going to read it out. The owner of property in Connor Center wants to rent an existing building on his site to a business that will open a motor vehicle repair shop. His property is in the city center redevelopment district and is zoned I-1 industrial. Okay, I kind of gave this one away a little bit earlier when we were talking. Is this a by right use in the I-1 zoning district? Okay, so they want to have a motor vehicle repair shop. I-1 zoning district, is it a by right use? And Basil, how do I pull over the Google? I want to show them the zoning ordinance.
It's already there.
Oh, it is? Okay, I'm sorry.
Can't see the mouse.
There it is. So I just need to reduce that one in size. There we go. Okay, good.
You just want to open up like Google Earth?
No, it's good. I got it. Thanks. All right, so let's come over here to the zoning ordinance. And, sorry, this is kind of slow, but chapter 31 is the zoning ordinance. Okay, so then we come down here and we go district regulations. And I'm trying to see, my eyesight's not so good here. Let's see. There we go. That's it. Okay, thanks. So now, I-1 industrial district. Now, let's see, make that a little bit bigger here. Come down here and, oops, there we go. Right here, it says permitted uses. Those are the by right uses. So, there's a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to make you go through them. The answer is no. It's not in here anywhere in the by right uses, okay? So, first answer is no. It's not a by right use. So, if not, can he apply for a conditional use permit to allow for this use? Well, go down a little bit further to D here. It says conditional uses. These are the only conditional uses allowed in the I-1 zoning district. Okay, and there is no use there for that. It says, well, there is a use for that. It says, but he cannot apply for a conditional use permit here because although it's allowed as a conditional use permit, if you remember, I said it was in the city center redevelopment district. So because that's not compatible with the city center redevelopment district, the answer is no. So that's the problem we ran into years ago. We just did a blanket city center redevelopment district for all of Connor Center. And that's why I put that in there. And you can go and look. The only two types of zoning that are allowed, as I said before, are MUD and PUD in the city center redevelopment district. If you go to the, let's see, I'm sorry, I keep on doing this to you guys. Go here, these are the appropriate zoning district for city centers on page 5 of chapter 11 of the comprehensive plan. I won't go through it, but this says basically it's got to be MUD or PUD. Okay, that's how they work together. Okay, so any questions on that scenario? All right, another property owner sees the city center phase 3 development being built on land adjacent to hers and decides that her property would be the perfect location for a new hotel. Her property is in the Connor Center redevelopment district and is zoned I-1 industrial. Is a hotel permitted in the I-1 zoning district? So, Councilmember, okay, no, it's not, and because it's not listed on that list that we had here before. You might ask, why is it not allowed? Well, it's just not. You guys decide what you want in each one of your zoning districts, and some governing body in the past said no. If not, what zoning districts would allow the property owner to build a hotel on her property? Now, this requires you to kind of go through all the different zoning districts. That's something that Mickey does. I do it when someone asks me a question. I don't know if any of you did that. Did you?
I read some of it.
Okay, so why don't you give me one that might be okay?
I think I had the business to the B2, I think.
B2, yep, B2 is definitely one, and that's City Code Section 31-19B9, if you're interested. Now,
Does someone at home want to speak?
B3 also?
what's that?
B3.
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 The B3, I don't think a B3 allows a hotel. I can check real quick. You might be right. Let's see. Boy.
Yeah, see. Maybe microphone. I'm sorry.
It said all permitted use of B2 with the last word B1 of of 31.19.
Good, and I guess then the answer is good, is yes, and I'm glad you did that. So when I did this, Mickey was supposed to proofread it, and I proofread it, and obviously we missed a couple too, so thank you for that. Any others?
I had written down section 31-52A, but I don't know if that's part
That,
of
I
it.
believe, is the section for the rezonings, right? Or
PUs, I think.
conditional use permits, right? Yeah, this is here, this would be a hotel, since, for the same reason that B3 allows it, PUD and MUD both allow it as well. Because if you go there, it says any, I'm sorry, someone was speaking.
I2, someone said I2.
I2, yes, because I think any use in the B2 is allowed in the I2 as well. Yes,
So the PUD and the MUD would also work?
yes.
That's what I got.
That's good. Some people actually got into the books. That's
Did
great.
you say B2 and B3?
Yes,
B2, B3, PUD, MUD,
and I2.
I2.
Okay.
Okay, now the question is, though, which of those zoning districts are compatible with the Connor Center redevelopment district designation?
PUD.
Well, PUD's not just the Connor Center, not the city center. Remember, city center is PUD, MUD.
Right.
Connor Center, the only two compatible zoning districts are the I1 and the I2.
I2. I had written I2, but I don't know if that's true.
I2,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
she would, you're good. So she'd have to rezone to I2. Now, that's our incentive zoning district for the Connor Center, by the way. So that, we won't go into that, but that triggers some potential tax incentives. Excuse me. Can she amend the comprehensive plan to bring her property into the city center redevelopment district?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes, she could. She could
can?
apply.
Yes.
Now, it's not something you guys have to approve. Remember, this is
Right.
the one where you have a lot of discretion. You can say, no, we don't want your property in there. We made these lines for a reason. But she can always apply
Oh,
to have,
that's the tricky part.
to do it, okay? So if she did that, say she wanted to take advantage of the MUD district, to do that, she'd have to rezone to the city center redevelopment district, because that's the only comp plan designation that allows the MUD district, right? So she'd do comp plan amendment application, rezoning application, hotels a by right use in the MUD, so no conditional use permit. Now, interestingly, there is a height floor in the MUD district, so everything has to be, I think it's 40 feet, is that correct? Everything has to be at least 40 feet, so if she wanted to come in with a one-story hotel, I don't know why she would, but she'd have to get a waiver that you would have to approve after the planning commission had made a recommendation. So, if without the waiver, she'd have to build it at least 40 feet or above. So that's kind of how those all kind of go into each other, or work together. Any questions on that scenario? Okay, next scenario, number 3. After getting a comp plan amendment approved that brings her property into the city center redevelopment district, the same property owner determines that an apartment complex would be much more appropriate for her property than a hotel. Is an apartment complex permitted in the I1 zoning district?
No.
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 And again, we went back and we looked at the list and there's no hotel in there. Okay, if not, what zoning districts would allow the property owner to build an apartment complex on her property?
R2?
R2, definitely, yeah.
MUD?
MUD, yep.
PUD?
And PUD, yeah. And for the same reasons, because, PUD, MUD, you can have everything that's permitted in the R2 with, I think there might be some exceptions, but certainly the apartments are one of the ones that are allowed. Okay, so which of these zoning districts are compatible with the city center redevelopment district designation?
PUD?
PUD, yeah.
And MUD.
And MUD. Those are the only two. And again, that's page 5 of chapter 11, tells you exactly what are the compatible ones for the city center redevelopment district. Would an apartment complex be allowed as a standalone use on her property?
No, because it's mixed use, right?
No.
Right? Laura, you're on there, and who said no over the phone?
Lester?
Lester, okay, could you explain why?
Well, I saw something that said only 75% residential.
Yes, that's exactly right. So both the MUD district and the PUD within excuse me a second. If you look at the PUD language, if it's in the city center redevelopment district, then you also have that limitation. So it's 75% max residential, 25% non-residential, unless you get a waiver, all right? So you can actually get a waiver for that. So there is a possibility that you could have a standalone apartment complex within city center. But the thing is remember, you have complete discretion on whether or not you approve that waiver. Okay, that's one of the ones where you don't have to worry about it, because you've already said 75% is the max. You're wanting us to do something above and beyond that. Prove to us that you're meeting the intent of this district. So if you go in the district and you find out what the intent is, they have to give you guys a narrative statement of justification that says why they think this is meeting the intent of this zoning district. Okay, they probably have a good argument, but you have the final say of whether or not you think that's a good argument. So remember that. Okay, and like I said, you can submit that at the same time, and when we do that, and we have a bunch of them like that, we have a comp plan amendment, rezoning, CUP, and waiver all at the same time. Even though there's 4 separate votes that are taken, we'll do the one public hearing because it just makes sense to handle them all together. Okay, any questions on that scenario? All right, next one. A rabbi wants to build a synagogue on property his congregation has purchased in Connor Center. The property is in the Connor Center redevelopment district and is zoned I-1 industrial. Is a synagogue permitted in the I-1 zoning district?
No.
No, it's not. No, you saw that. It's not listed as one of the things you can do. However, and this is the one thing that, I said you can get most of the answers in the zoning ordinance and the comp plan. However, there's a federal law. It's called the Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act. So they want land use and prisoners together for this. So this is Congress for you. But basically what they've said is you cannot treat a piece of property or a prisoner different just because there is a religious connection to it. So if you allow a prisoner to do something and you decide you're not going to allow another prisoner to do it solely because he or she is doing it for a religious purpose, you violate the RLUIPA. Similarly, if you allow, say, an Elks Lodge in a zoning district, but you don't allow a church, you're treating that church differently solely because on its face, solely because it's a religious use instead of a non-religious use. Okay. So that would not be permitted. So for us, our zoning ordinance is not compatible with RLUIPA. So I've actually given a legal opinion to Mickey that she uses when she operates on this stuff. So we actually have a church up in the I-1 zoning district. We have a church in the B2 zoning district. And the reason, even though the one in the I-1 district, as we'll see, probably needs a conditional use permit, but nonetheless, we cannot deny it solely because it's religious use. Okay? So, when you go and you look at, when you take that into consideration, you say, what zoning districts would allow a synagogue as a by right use? Okay? So this is now, you have to take RLUIPA into consideration, and then what use is in there that is consistent or like a church, okay? Or a religious institution. And I'm going to give you these because, well, let's first see what you came up with as far as a by right use. What zoning districts allow a church or a synagogue or a mosque or some other religious institution as a by right use?
I had PUD.
Agricultural district.
Oh.
Agricultural, yes. And the PUD, you said PUD, and why did you say PUD?
I don't remember. I don't have my notes.
Is it a by right use? You're right, it is, but I want to know why you think that. So,
I don't remember what I read.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
So let's go from the premise that if there's another type of use allowed by right, and in this case, in B2, they allow meetings, okay, Elks Lodge and fraternal organizations. Okay, so agricultural, it states right on the front, churches are allowed by right. B1 allows it because it allows other uses similar to it. B2 allows it because, one, it allows all uses in B1, but also because it allows uses that are similar to religious institutions. B3 allows it because it allows everything in the B2. I2 allows it because it allows everything that's permitted by right in the B2. and then PUD MUD for the same reasons. So you have a whole bunch that because of RLUIPA, there are 7. Without RLUIPA, there's 1, A1. Okay, so I threw that one in there just because I want you to know that there's some things that are beyond our local ordinance. So we cannot be in conflict with state law, and in some areas we can't be in conflict with federal law either. A lot of times federal law doesn't apply, but this one specifically does. Okay, for the conditional uses, those are easy, so I'll just kind of leave it out there if you guys want to, anyone at home or here want to kind of throw out what conditional or what zoning districts allow a religious institution as a conditional use.
R1 and R2?
Yep. And then for the same reasons as RLUIPA issue, also the I-1, because we allow sporting facilities, arenas, stadiums. Now, whether or not that is, they still have to come for a conditional use permit. So the governing body, you would still determine whether or not things like traffic flow, the nights they're going to be using it. The conditional use permit, you impose conditions. Okay, unlike a rezoning where they offer or proffer what they're going to do to mitigate the impact, you impose those conditions. So you can impose conditions on what they can do. So maybe school, maybe they want to put something right next to the school. Maybe school has gets out at 2:30 in the afternoon, whatever. Maybe you put some limitations. Okay, so you're not going to have services that interfere with the school, getting out. So you have to take it beyond those hours, and it's usually a collaborative effort. Okay, even though you're imposing those conditions, we don't, at least in Manassas Park, I've never seen a conditional use permit that was approved that didn't have the concurrence of the applicant also. So even though it's imposed, it really is a collaborative effort, as are proffers. Even though proffers are voluntary and we accept them, there's a lot of push and pull. So we're trying to get the same thing. We're trying to get something that's good for the community, that's not going to cause too much of a disruption. And if it does, we mitigate that disruption or that impact. Okay, so I think.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
I see it, by the way. Like churches and synagogues and mosques, are they, is it true that they're considered as commercial buildings? Or
in what regard?
Classified as commercial buildings?
We don't tax them, so they're not considered commercial for tax purposes. Is that what you meant, or are you talking about whether it's the residential versus non-residential mix?
Well, I guess both. I guess I was trying to see, because I've heard that churches like that, since they're allowed in agriculture, they're considered to be commercial buildings. So I found it kind of like contradicting each other, even though there's no type of commercial business being taking place in these buildings, but they're considered to be commercial for some reason.
Well,
I don't know if that was
So that's kind of a loaded question in some ways. So instead of saying commercial, I would say non-residential, because they're not necessarily commercial. Now, they can be commercial, and to the extent they're commercial, some jurisdictions tax them. So, to be completely free of local tax, a lot of jurisdictions require that only religious functions occur there, okay? And anything that's not religious gets taxed. Manassas Park doesn't do that. Mainly probably because we don't have a whole lot of churches, we don't have a lot of experience with it, but we are getting more. I think we had a mosque that was operating in the B2 district a while ago. We have a church up in the I-1. We have another church in the B2. So we do have churches, and then we have another church, at least one down in the R1 zoning district on Manassas Drive. So we do have a few. If we're getting a little more experience, but we don't tax them in Manassas Park. We don't consider them commercial because commercial is usually a term used for some sort of a taxing purpose. I would call them more non-residential, because really that's where it's going to come into play, is whether or not they go into an MUD or the PUD in the city center redevelopment district, if they're going to meet that 75-25 requirement. So obviously they would, because they're not residential. So did that answer your question, or did that confuse you more?
The only thing I can think of commercial commercial is.
A little bit of both. Either way, I mean, in the zoning office, I guess, what would the building code be?
Well, that's, maybe you just pointed that out, that the building code would kick in, so it would have to meet commercial building code requirements. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, because I don't think there's a non-residential building code.
Yeah, so zoning,
I was
you're right.
wondering, were they classified as a commercial or a residential?
Yeah, and so for building code, we're dealing mainly with zoning right now, but for building code, you're right, it would most likely be a business or a commercial.
Assembly.
Yeah. And then again, the reason for the building code is not so much the use, it's more concerned about, fire safety and occupancy, total occupancy. So it's the type of use. So it would be similar to, again, a fraternal organization meeting hall or something. So yeah, in that sense, it would be considered the same way that they would for the building code as well as for the zoning. That answer your question, Haseeb?
Oh, yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Oh, you're good. All right, so I think we were on number 5, is that correct? And for those who don't have this in front of them, there's only 5 and 6 for the last 2, so we're not gonna keep this all night long. Number 5 scenario is the owner of a building located on property zone B2 general business would like to lease additional areas of his building to his existing tenant who operates a used car sales business. The property is located in the city center redevelopment district. Can the used car sales business expand into additional areas of the building?
No.
No.
Okay, well, this is a conditional use, right? So B2. So they could with a conditional use permit,
Okay.
right? Because it used to be a by right use years ago in B2,
Okay.
and the governing body changed the code to make it a conditional use requirement.
Okay.
Now, all those uses that were there at that time are grandfathered. So we can't close them, we can't make them go away just because now we require a conditional use permit, but they can't expand that non-conformity. Okay, so the big question is, can they go into a neighboring property, they're operating legally, they were grandfathered in? Well, they may or may not, so definitely with a conditional use permit. But the next part of this question says, would it matter if the previous tenant of the additional areas of the building also operated used car sales businesses? The answer is yes, it does matter because, and like I just said, at one time, the B2 zoning district permitted used car sales as a by right use. All such uses previously permitted by right that currently operated without a valid CUP are considered legally non-conforming uses. Okay, and that's Article 5 of Chapter 13 of the City Code, if you want to look it up. If a portion of the building has a legally non-conforming use, that portion of the building can be used for that same use by another tenant. So if there was someone of that use that was there and they moved out, then the owner could lease it to allow this company to expand. So that's the short answer. The overall area cannot increase. Okay? That's kind of a little bit of a trick question. Any questions on that? And that's one we run into a lot. We have used car dealers in the city that fall into that category. Unfortunately, when the zoning ordinance was amended, nobody went over and took a snapshot in time of what businesses were where. So, there's kind of take your word for it. Over the years, I think, Mickey, now we do actually have a list of, at one point, it was well after, but we did take a snapshot in time, and now we adhere to that now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the last question. The owner of a limousine service has an approved conditional use permit that allows her to operate her business, including storing her fleet vehicles on site. COVID-19 has decimated the limousine business, however, and the owner now wants to revert back to the previous use on the property, which was an automobile repair shop. The property is in the Connor Center redevelopment district and is zoned I-1 industrial. Can the owner revert back to the previous use?
Yes.
No.
Okay, we got, who says yes?
Yes.
Okay, we got a couple yeses, no's. What about at home or people calling in? Any yeses? No's? Don't want to commit? Okay. Probably not, okay? If an approved conditional use ceases operation for a year or more, the cup becomes void and thereafter a new cup would be required for that use. And that's City Code Section 31-54.1 E3, if you want to look it up. In addition, the terms of the cup, the new cup for the limousine service, might extinguish a previously issued cup, especially if the site needs to be modified for the new use. So a lot of times, a conditional use permit, what they want to do there, they have to actually do some site adjustments. So they'll actually submit a plan that becomes part of the approval. Just like with a rezoning, they'll proffer the plan, and then that becomes part of the underlying zoning. Same with the conditional use permit.
Dean, I don't quite understand why they can't have the automobile repair shop.
Well, because if they might be able. So let's say the limousine service started, they got the conditional use permit, and by some miracle, they were able just to kick it into high gear. COVID comes, they say, oh man, this is not working. We need to go back to the previous use. If it's only been a year, less than a year, yes, they could. Okay, they could go back to that previous use. But a conditional use permit, if you stop the use that's permitted by the conditional use permit for more than a year, that use ceases. You can't do it anymore. You have to get a new conditional use permit.
But it's I-1. I think that's where I'm getting hung up.
Well, and remember, I-1, the automobile repair is a conditional use, not a by right use.
Oh, okay.
So they need another conditional use permit. Okay. So if not, let's say it's been a year and a half, so they can't do the old auto repair business. What other uses or what other business could they have on that property?
If it's an I-1, right?
It's I-1. So, I mean, are they stuck? Can they just not do anything because their cup is void?
They could have photographer, studio. They could
I
do
like it. You're good.
industrial
You should go with
bakery.
that. Yeah, you do anything that's permitted by right, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah, so all the uses listed in 3120B would still be permitted. So by right uses are just that. You can always do a by right use. Okay, there's no additional legislative action required. It's the conditional uses that, can expire. Once you're zoned I-1, that, we may be stale zoning, but we don't make you go and do something else. You can always do I-1. Okay.
For a site plan amendment, because it's a change in use.
Site plan amendment is different, okay? That's the ministerial aspect of it, you're right. So a change of use, anytime you change the site enough that impacts the stormwater runoff, anything that's associated with the public component, you need to get a new site plan. Okay, and site plans can expire as well. They're only good, if you get a site plan approved and you don't build for 5 years, it goes stale and you have to go get a new site plan. Okay, if the owner decides to use her property for a different type of business, could she revert back to using her property for the limousine service a year and a half later? I think I already answered that earlier.
Conditional.
Obviously, no, because, it's a conditional use and after a year it goes voided. So those are all the questions I had. I mean, I just wanted to kind of get you guys into the books, and Councilmember Amaya, I think you were probably the only person that's ever took it this seriously before. Thank you very much. I'm serious, I'm excited about that. Usually people's eyes are rolling in the back of their heads because I do it Saturday morning at 10 in the morning. No one has coffee and they've all eaten donuts and they're just on a sugar high or sugar low. But are there any other questions? I appreciate everyone listening. Oh, yeah.
Just to go back on the conditional use, so if the limousine operator, their permit expires, they cannot revert back to the original use. Is that what you said?
Right, yeah, after a year, well, if it was a conditional use, but because a conditional use permit, if you stop using the use that's allowed by the conditional use permit for more than a year, then you can no longer do that use without a new conditional use permit.
Right, so you don't need a conditional use permit for the the auto repair.
Yeah, you do. In I-1, you do. It's a conditional use.
Okay, I think that's what I.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't.
And then where does,
Pardon me?
oh, then I was gonna ask about, like, I guess, I mean, would they be vested, would they have vested rights already, or
No.
grandfathered in or something, or I don't know what the term would be?
Vested rights is a statute in the Code of Virginia for vested rights. It says that if you have an affirmative governmental act and you've spent money because of that affirmative governmental act, then you basically have a vested right. Okay, but vested rights don't apply to a conditional use. You don't have a vested right for a conditional use if the conditions state clearly that it expires after a year if you don't do it. It's not a vested right. Now, if you, let's say, let me try to use a vested right scenario. So let's say you got a site plan approved, you went and you started building something, and then the governing body changed the law and said, nope, we're not allowing that anymore. Well, you now have a vested right. Okay, you have an affirmative governmental act, which was a site plan approval. You've spent money, in response to that affirmative governmental act. And so now you have a vested right because, otherwise governments would just be running around bankrupting people. That's not something we do.
Let's see. All right, I got it. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. And for anyone who has a question that they don't want to ask right now, feel free to email me or call me, or I'd be more than happy to explain this all to you guys. The kind of the summary sheet, the 5-page summary sheet I sent out to you guys as well. Take a look at that now that we've done this. It might make a little bit more sense. It probably didn't make a whole lot of sense when you first read it, but after going through this, it might start making some sense to you now. And the reason I do this is because we don't get a lot of these, okay? But this is probably one of the things you do as a legislative body and the Planning Commission at home as well, that is really, really, really important. Okay, localities get sued because the bodies that are considering this don't really understand what they're doing. Okay, and there's you've all heard of the term arbitrary and capricious. Well, that is a terrible thing for a local government to do. We have what's called the fairly debatable standard. The fairly debatable standard in Virginia means that if two people of average intelligence both look at the same set of facts and they come away with different conclusions, it's fairly debatable. Okay, that's the standard courts are going to look at when they decide whether or not whatever you've done is appropriate. What they're going to look at is what's on the record. Okay, so it's what staff has presented to you and what was said here in the meeting, in the public hearing. Okay, so it's very important for you, Planning Commission and governing body alike, before you go into a public hearing for a land use matter, that you don't make up your mind. Okay, because you're supposed to be open-minded when you go into that public hearing. So I've never seen this happen here, but some jurisdictions, you get people that go on TV and say, I don't like this use, I'm gonna vote against it, I think it's a terrible idea I live in Prince William County, I get supervisors sending me stuff all the time telling me what a horrible idea this is, come to the public hearing tonight and tell everyone how a horrible idea is. Well, they've clearly made up their mind, they're not objective at all, right? So I urge you to please be objective. The goal is to not get sued. And if we do get sued, that we prevail because we've been objective. We've met the fairly debatable standard. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. I think it'll also help to maybe rewatch the video on YouTube. That's a good thing.
And if you ever want to just kind of come in and sit down and just throw different scenarios, I would be happy to do that as well. Nikki's very busy though. Don't bug her. Okay. She's just so you know, her office, not only do they deal with the comp plan, which is future land use, they do the zoning, which is current land use, and then they also do zoning enforcement. And how many Mickeys do we have there? One.
Oh my.
And we have one person that assists her, who I think is not there right now, right? So we have Mickey. So, and she's very overwhelmed, so let's, you can bug me, but not her, please.
Okay. Gosh, thank you, Dean.
All right, thank you.
I also want to thank our planning commissioners for joining us this evening. Thank you very much.
Now, I know the BZA and the EDA were also invited to watch. I don't know if any of them did. If you did watch and you have any questions about what we discussed tonight, also for you, please feel free to email me or call me or set up a meeting to discuss it, because it also impacts you, especially the BZA, but even the EDA as far as the relationship between what you do and what's happening in the downtown area.
Okay, super, thank you. Well, that concludes our work session. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
One more? Okay. Opposed, abstained, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.